Hello and welcome back to our Hackintosh series, in which we are installing macOS Big Sur on a Lenovo M93p tiny computer. In the last video we created our USB install disk, and today we'll be updating the config on that disk in order to run the install on a Haswell CPU computer. So if we just go to our USB stick, we can see we've got the recovery file, we've got our EFI folder, we've got OC file in there, and we've got a default config.plist that we copied across from the OpenCore repository. So in this video we need to actually change the config in there to make it compatible with Haswell. So first off, let's just jump back into the OpenCore official guide. So OpenCore Hackintosh guide. There we go, and click on that. So we've done the USB creation, we're on to configs and Haswell. Okay, so the program we need to actually change the config is called property. It's basically like a little Python regedit just for this file here. So go to code and download the zip file, and that should pop up in our downloads folder. And then we just extract and delete the repo, we don't need that. And we're going to property itself. Now if you're using Windows, all you need to do is right click on the property.bat file there and run as administrator, and that will pop up. But because I'm using Linux Mint, what we have to do, we need to manually launch the Python script there. So we open a terminal and we just do Python 3 and property.py and click enter. And there we go, it pops up, and once it's open we just go to file, open. On Windows it'd be simple, just go to your USB stick. On Linux it's a little bit more difficult, just go to media, then your username, then USB, EFI, OC, and we just need to load that config file. There we go. So as you can see, if I expand it to the left, it's just a lot of key value pairs that we need to correlate to these value pairs in this guide here. So there's a lot of entries here that we'd actually use, or there's alternates, and yeah, it's a bit confusing. So instead of using the guide, we can actually use a working version of the config from my own system. So we'll just get rid of that for a second, and we'll open up another copy of property, and in this one we will open it's in my downloads folder, this Haswell config that I know works. And if we go to the right and expand, so we need to basically make this one on the left, which is our install media, match the one on the right and the one in the online guide. So to start with, on the left hand side we just get rid of our warnings. They're just basically comments from OpenCore that we don't need. Right, and as you can see there's lots and lots and lots of entries here. So we have to make this compatible with our install folders on our USB stick. So what we do, we go to File on the top left, and we go to OC Snapshot, and we again navigate to our USB stick. We go to EFI, we just highlight OC, click on OK or select folder, and then that will scan the OC folder and get rid of all the stuff that's not in there, it's not needed, and self-populate everything accordingly. So that's a good start. And now all we do is right click on root and collapse all, right click on root and collapse all. So now it's just the task of making the config match what we need for Haswell. So we start for ACPI and we go to add. We should have two entries. Yes, we've got two entries. and these are the AML files that we added to our config, so the EC desktop and the plug. If we go to the left, which is the config we're working on, we've got two AMLs, yeah, and they're both set to enabled. So make sure they're both set to enabled. If they're not, just double click on true and set it to true. Or it would have been false. There we go, so double click and set to true. If they're not enabled, then your install won't work. Okay, so that's add done. So we just collapse add. If we go to quirks and see if there's any changes from default. So everything is false on the right hand side apart from reset logo status, and that's also set to true on the left hand side. So that's fine. Default settings are fine for that. So that's ACPI done. Next we'll look at booter. The only thing we change under booter is quirks, so expand quirks, and now let's see if they match up. The first one set to true should be avoid runtime defrag. Okay, that's set to true. The next one set to true should be enable safe mode slide. That's also set to true. Then it should be write unprotector. Yep. Fix up Apple EFI images. Yep. Provide custom slide. Provide custom slide true. Yep. Then it should be 0, false, -1, true, false, false. Okay. So quirks by default is set. So that's booter done. As you can see, it's quite simple. It's just copy and paste in, or just eyeballing it, make sure it's fine. Okay, device properties. Okay, we've got two entries here. We've only got one entry on the left. Let's see if that one's the same. Yeah, layout ID. Oh, layout ID. Okay. So, best thing to do here is just right click on the actual entry and click on copy. Then right click on add and paste. And then to make sure it's in the right order, just left click. Actually, it's easier to do from the top, bottom to the top. Left click on the bottom one and drag that up to the top. There we go, so they're in the correct order. We're not changing this one. Okay, this one has got the wrong name. It should be called that. I can copy it from here because I've got it open. You can just copy that name from the guide. So here we go. Device properties, add. You're adding this parent here. So just copy that label. Double click on the header. Copy, Control V to copy the name in. Okay, layout ID. We don't need layout ID. We need something called double APL IG platform ID. So highlight that and copy it. Double click, paste. What data is it? We are using a desktop Haswell with an integrated GPU. So that sounds like what we're using to me. So we copy that and paste that in there. Now we also need something called a device ID. So just highlight device ID. This is the ID for the actual GPU chip on the Haswell CPU. So we haven't got device ID there. So what we do, we just go to Pico root, right click, and new child. Double click on new string and type in device ID. Its type is data, and its data type is here. Here we go. Is this value starting with 12? So we just paste that into there. Excellent. So if I just get rid of that and compare it to my working config, yeah, we've got device ID 1204,000, 1204,000, and double APL IG platform ID 0300 2200D. Excellent. So that's device properties done. And that's probably the most difficult bit you have to do in this config. So everything else is quite easy. So go to kernel. This is where our kex files are loaded. So if we go to add, there should be 7. Yeah. And our OC scan should have picked up those 7 too. Yes. Now the order the kex files are loaded is important because kex may overwrite previous kex. So if we go to number 0, it's set to our Ethernet controller, and on our default is set to Lilu. So I think if we expand these, our Ethernet should be here somewhere. There we go, our Ethernet is number 4. So just to make sure it's correct and compatible, so now this one works, we'll drag our Ethernet up to the first position. There we go. Now that's set to true. It has to be set to true, or she won't have any Ethernet, and at the default it's set to false for some bizarre reason, so we'll just set that to true. And then we'll just double check all the others, make sure they are enabled, because it's pointless having them if they're not enabled. Yep. Yep. Okay. And they're all fine. So add is done. Quirks is the next bit we need to look at in the under kernel. And again, we'll just double check that the values are set. So Apple CPU, CPM, CPU lock should be set to true. Okay, by default it's set to false, so we'll set that to true. The next one set to true here is Apple XCPM config lock. Okay, we'll set that to true here too. Next one set to true should be disable IO mapper. Okay, so there's quite a few in here that need to set to true. Next one is disable linked jettison. Disable link, okay, that's true. Next one is panic no kex dump. Okay, so panic no kex dump, that needs to be true. Panic timeout kernel panic, over timeout kernel, okay, that needs to be true. And all the rest are false, yeah, and we've got a -1 stuck in the middle there too. Okay, so that's the quirks done. And that's kernel done. So MISC here, expand boot. Again, just double check 0, none, false. Okay, IDE auxiliary. Okay, set to true by default. We'll turn that to false. That saves you having to press the space bar on the initial boot menu. So, okay. Everything else should be the same. Auto false true, yeah, 0.5. Okay, so that's boot done. So it's pretty quick once you get into it. So debug. Apple debug set to true. Okay. Apple panic is set to true. Disable watchdog is set to false. Okay. Display level is 0, 0, and display delay. Display level is set the same. Yes. Sys report is false. Okay. Target should be set to 67. So we just change that 3 to 67. 67. Okay, that's fine. That matches up. Security is the next one. Allow set default is set to true. So change it there. Okay, true, sign, false, 6. Okay, these all match by default, apart from this one. Scan policy should be set to 0. Now these two are important. Secure boot model, you need to set that to disabled with a capital D. And vault should be set to optional with a capital O. Excellent. So that's security done, and that is miscellaneous done. NVRAM. Add. The only values we're changing are in this last one here. Okay, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same. Okay, the boot args, these are just a string of arguments with spaces in between. These are all set or in here, so if we get that to misc, so we've done all this, so we're flying through it. Misc. MVRAM, yeah, okay. These are all the boot arguments. Basically just copy these in with a space in between each one. So we'll go back to here and we'll just copy this and complete a string across. Press enter. Okay, language. So the keyboard language is set to Russian by default. We need to set it to English. So instead of going through the hex and doing all hex values, what we do is we just double click on data and change that to string. There's now a string value, and we'll just copy that across to there. So that's EN-US uppercase :0, and again that is here on the guide if you want to just copy it across yourself. Okay, everything else is set fine. Right flash is set to true. Right flash is set to true. Okay, so MVRAM is done. Now platform info. True, false, yeah. All those root values look fine. We'll expand generic. Advise features set to false. Okay, the MLB and the product, the serial number and the UUID, we'll set those up once macOS is up and running. We can do that actually through the macOS itself. And you need to set those up so you can have FaceTime and Apple ID and all that good Apple integrated environment stuff. So we'll set it up later. Right. System product should be at iMac 14/4. So every version of macOS only has a list of compatible Mac systems. So if your Mac system that you're spoofing isn't compatible with the operating system, the install won't happen. So we are trying to spoof an iMac version 14 with a Haswell GPU. So we need to tell the install that that's the type of Mac we are using. So it is iMac 14,4, and the 4 is important because that tells Apple that we are using an integrated GPU. So, and we're using Big Sur as the operating system, so that is totally compatible. So that's generic done. That's generic done, and that's platform info done. So the last one is UEFI. There should be not a lot to change underneath this. These should all be set by default. True, false, 0, 0. Yep, they're all default. Don't change input, don't change audio. Connect driver should be true. Yeah, it is. Drivers, you should have 2 drivers in here. We just need to make sure that they are enabled on our config. Enabled true, enabled true. Again, look at the open runtime driver and the file system driver. So that's fine. We don't mess with input, we don't mess with outputs, we don't mess with protocols. Any quirks need changing. Let's have a look. Active HPET support, false. Disable security policy, false. Enable vector acceleration, true. False, 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 false. True is enable invalid flex ratio. Okay, we just need to set that ignore invalid flex ratio to true. So 1 was hiding. There we go. False, false. True is request boot var routing. That's okay. That's fine. -1, -1. False, false, 0, false. Okay, so the only one we had to change there was invalid flex ratio. Let's set that to true. And we don't touch reserve memory, and we don't touch unload. So that's it. We have now copied our working config across. You can double check it if you want. Like I said, all the values are in here. If you need to just copy them across instead of fat fingering them in. But yeah, if we now go to file and save. we can get out of here, we can get out of there, and now our USB stick is ready to be inserted into our M93, and we can go through the actual macOS install process, and we'll run through that in the next video. So thank you for watching.